In the journey of life, we often face trials and tribulations that test our faith and resilience. But through every challenge, there is a guiding light. Revival of Hope Global Outreach Ministries proudly presents My Mess Became My Message, 7 p.m. by Dr. Michelle Pert Ford. Dr. Michelle has transformed her life's challenges into a powerful message of hope and healing. Her mission is to create a safe space for women to find freedom, healing, and self-worth. Join Dr. Michelle on this transformative journey. Discover the power of faith, hope, and healing. Together, we can overcome any obstacle and embrace the future God has planned for us.
Press on, and to know that the God that we serve is the same today, the same yesterday, and He will be same forever.
Good evening, my friends. I am glad to be with you. This is My Mess Became My Message with Dr. Michiel. You're going to enjoy this program sponsored by the Revival Hope Global Outreach Ministry. We have a special guest today. You're going to enjoy what we do. You're going to enjoy having time to sit with Dr. Michiel and our special guest. So without further ado, we are going to put our heads together and we're going to bring on the doc. Hey, Doc, how are you?
Hello. I'm doing well. How about yourself?
All right, doing well. Just coming back from out of town. I'm doing good. I'm glad to be alive in the land of the living. Amen?
Amen.
All right.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you back on our soil.
All right.
And I'm sure you had a great time in the Philippines.
All right,
so
go for it.
I just want to welcome back everyone to My Mess Became My Message, where we keep it real about brain health behavior and building stronger minds. I'm your host, Dr. Michel, as was mentioned before. And today we're diving into a topic that affects every parent, teacher, and caregiver: executive function in school-age children with Dr. Daria Lawrence. Hey, Dee, how are you doing? I can't hear you.
Girl, we've been doing Zoom now for 5 years. How is it that I still somehow
I can hear you now. I can hear you now.
Wonderful. Hold on. My stand. Wait a minute. This is not going the way I thought. Hold on. We have a breakdown here. Houston. Why is this not doing what it's supposed to do? We were just fine. The view was good. Why are we doing this? Okay.
There you go.
We're going to go from there. There we are. Sorry, team. Love that. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, excited to see you. I think the last time we saw each other was in school.
Oh, how long ago that's been? That's been a minute.
Yeah.
And actually, the funniest, and since then, which loving that we're talking about brain health, traumatic brain injury, me over here. I'm just like,
oh my goodness. When you do it, you just do it big. I know.
Ma'am, let me tell you something. I thought, while we're getting into the topic, it's so wonderful to think about how many things the brain can do. Like, oh my goodness, and when I was still in the schools as a practicing SLP, it was just so parents, they'll sit there and they were used to say, Ms. Lawrence, he won't do or she won't do this. And I'm like, well, I don't do that either if I haven't taken my meds yet.
Yeah, exactly.
So as we break into this conversation and we think about executive function and what that looks like for families and what that looks like, for those people going through it, the interesting thing is that you notice normally everybody has these perfect, beautiful backgrounds. Well, I thought I would show you mine. My lovely executive function background that has flowers over here because the vase has fallen. There is a Christmas tree there, a random picture, maybe a pencil case holder. And then in front of me, I thought I would bring some things that'll make absolutely no sense if you don't have an executive function disorder. So, of course, because I'm a woman that has both ADHD and I am they call it, I think they call it neurodivergent now.
Yeah.
In my mind, my thought process is, look, my brain works just fine. Now, whether or not it does what you want it to do at the time you want it to do it, well, that's a different story. But when we think about executive function, so before we get started, let's get into that. That was me going out of order with my sequence and everything.
Well, what I want you to do first is to tell us what inspired your interest in executive functioning or child development.
A study of myself, should I tell you? So when I became a speech and language pathologist, I knew I always wanted to be an SLP. I always wanted to be the therapist that helped people communicate effectively. I wanted that vision. It did not matter in what form, I wanted it, right? So then I'm sitting there and I currently live in Memphis, Tennessee. And just a few days ago in the news, Memphis got a very uncomfortable title. Where we are one of the most dangerous places in the country, and one of the places that has one of the highest murder rates. Well, here's the thing. After living in Memphis this is 2025 now. I moved here in 2014, so almost 11 years. It'll be 11 years in July. One thing I noticed about Memphis that Memphis has, and a lot of and other places do, but there's a link there. Executive function is a developmental process that can be typically developing in a child that has a disorder. You can have a child that has a cognitive impairment, such as Down syndrome or trisomy 23. A child can have that disorder and still have typical or close to typical executive functioning. But a child who potentially has grown up in poverty, has a high rate of adverse childhood events, has had very little exposure to experiences that help them develop that skill of planning and executing and planning and executing. That kid could be typically developing and still have executive function disorders.
Oh, wow. So it could be environmental as well. That's what you're saying.
But instead, when we look at it, here's the fun part about that one. In the school system, if you look at the qualifications for what would make a child, or what would cause a school to think or reasonably infer that we believe a child has a disability, environmental factors are a disqualifying feature.
Oh, really?
Yes, ma'am. And to be fair, I'm not necessarily sure that there are days when I'm like, this kid probably would have turned out different had they lived somewhere else. But then there were days where I'm like, this is absolutely not a disorder. This is not something a school or therapy can address. Well, what do you do when you get the kid that sits in the middle, right? What do you do when you get the kid that was in foster care for 6 years?
Yeah.
What do you do when you get the kid that had a parent that, unfortunately, instead of enrolling them in school and ensuring that they attended school regularly, that parent, for whatever reason, that kid didn't go to school? Though it was reported that they were in a homeschool program, we have no records that support that they were. It's not my place to say that they were or weren't in homeschool. What I do know is that at the end of the day, when I have a kid that would show back up, and for the record, I was in the high school population. When I had a kid show back up at school as a ninth grader that was 16 or 17, and I would ask them, when was the last time you were in an organized educational setting? Like another, just a regular, I didn't care if it was a private school, public school, makes me no difference. Any kind of school.
Yeah.
And they would say 3rd grade. And I'm like,
3rd grade?
Oh, ma'am, yeah. 3rd grade. There were some I think my biggest gap was someone 3rd grade. When they returned to school, they should have been in the 10th. They were actually they were placed in the 8th.
Oh, my
I believe.
God.
And the child was smaller in stature. Had they not told me the chronological age, I would have been like, ooh, didn't see that one coming. And so what we saw then were, if this child has not had a traditional education that could not be explained by either cultural differences, religious differences, that couldn't be explained by geographical location, they had been born and raised in Memphis, and it could not be explained by any other thing that we could come up with, my next question then becomes, is this an executive function disorder? Or do I have a child who has not had enough exposure to concepts in their natural environment that they would have naturally learned them? Well, guess what? How do you think you develop executive functions? You have to experience. And so it gave, I would have parents that would have children that were diagnosed with disabilities when they were very young. And I love a good mom and dad. I do. I love them. And then I'll ask them, well, how does your baby do X? And I'm gonna say y'all your baby, because they could be 21, y'all. I'm gonna call them your baby, and
So baby, yeah.
Yeah. How does your baby? Well, how does he do this, ma'am? Oh, well, I didn't ask you what you do. I asked you what he does. The number of times parents would look at me and they would say, I don't know if he could do it. Wonder why. So after I got that, about 2 or 3 years of those responses.
Oh, wow.
While I'm working in the schools, well, then, you and I bump into each other at school, and my capstone is on executive function in teenage boys, because who do we always worry about misbehaving? Young Black boys who clearly make decisions where I'm like, were you thinking about that? And then I started thinking, wait a minute, hold on. How did he do that if he can't do X? So I would start asking my kids questions. How many days a week are there? They go, huh? And I'd say, if you can, you can hear. Hurry up now. And I would.
So they need that time to process.
Yeah, I'm not. That is something that, because you got to think about it. If a kid's been going to school for, at this point, because I said high school is right. You've been going to school for 10 years. You can't tell me how many days a week there are. There's a problem there.
Of course.
If I ask you how many hours of the day there are, there's a problem there if you can't tell me. And we think about, and you talk about processing, right? There are some things, if I ask him what his name is, he doesn't have to process that. Oh, wow. If I ask him what his mom's name is, he doesn't have to process that. So if he could tell me that information, what's stopping you from learning the other parts?
Exactly.
So my delving into executive function was not completely unintentional. When I was at the University of Wisconsin, I studied under Dr. Lynn Terkstra, very amazing therapist that I respected for how she described the brain and how it worked with the communication. But what I discovered was, as I read the literature more and more about how executive function looks in students, how it develops, and how it's impacted by poverty. Memphis is #1 in the country for childhood poverty. In metropolitan statistical areas of 1 million or greater, Memphis is leading the country. So we not only have one of the highest violent crime rates, we also have the highest poverty rate. Those are two things, and we all know their correlation is not causation, but when I've got those two variables in the same area and one of the highest concentrations of kids who are either overdiagnosed, and actually, it's not so much that they're not being diagnosed with a disability. My concern is that it's the wrong one.
Yes.
And so we all know this. If you have pneumonia, a doctor treats that with antibiotics. If you have a sinus infection, they may use steroids.
Yeah.
Different drugs. You may have some of the same symptoms. It may make you feel the same, but the origin of the sickness is different. The cure for the sickness is different. So if you miss it, you will treat something that doesn't exist.
That's not there.
And will treatment be effective? Likely no. So that's how I got involved in executive functioning, because I'm like, you're not going to tell me that he robbed the corner store when he can't even get his AB schedule right, and for some strange reason, he can't seem to remember where his classroom is. But reportedly, he has average cognition. Something's not right there. So it became an exploratory way to really challenge how educators and parents thought about how or what their child's behavior and or other academic performance look like when we're sitting there asking just like, well, how is it? But girl, I could talk about it all day. So that's how we got there. Now.
Okay. So yeah, good. That was very thorough.
Girl.
Very, very thorough.
I love it. I could talk about it all day.
Yeah. So what are common signs of underdeveloped executive function in kids? That's just for viewers, if you have
So,
children or know other children, to be aware.
right, gotcha. So I'm not going to say underdeveloped. So what I'm going to say is missing. It's not there.
Okay.
Because executive function develops as a result of exposure and scaffolding. So if we're looking for a skill that we would check off on a developmental checklist, I can't really say there are some checklists, but
Mhm.
here's why I challenge those checklists. Those checklists are only as valid as the population they were normed on or normed for.
And we discussed that before.
So here's my thing. It may be developmentally accepted or a
Mm-hmm.
culturally accepted practice in some cultures for children to sit at the same dinner table as adults while the adults carry on a conversation that may or may not include topics that a child would be aware of.
Mm-hmm.
So, from an executive function standpoint, a child may learn from sitting at that table that conversations have a flow. Hang on. Got you guys. I got the normed for question just a second. So, a child may sit at a table with adults and understand that conversation is one person speaks, other people listen. I have to wait for my turn and then I will speak. So, that's
Mm-hmm.
executive function. It's understanding what's about to come and planning for it. Now, River City Auditorium, I'm going to help you out right now. Normed for, that's a short word for normative sampling or standard, and it's also known as standardized assessment. You know how we love to talk about those pesky little standardized tests we give kids at schools?
Mm-hmm.
Those standardized tests are based on, or the results of those tests and the measurements that they use, they are based on a normative sample of children that meet a specific criterion within, and they're looking at a specific skill. For
Mm-hmm.
example, there are assessments. I will, and this is technical, but you'll get it. I promise. There is a test in the speech and language world. It's called the OWLS 2. I have no interest one way or the other in any assessment that is used for testing a kid for communication needs. However, there is a reason I use the OWLS 2 in Memphis. It is because a normative sample of children in Memphis were used when they designed the test.
Oh wow.
Right. It is
Yeah.
also the main reason I do not use the Cell 5. And Dr. Michiel, the Cell 5 is the bane of my existence. I do not like it. But
Really.
the reason why I don't is because it's heavily executive function heavy. It's not looking at language, it's looking at how well a child remembers. If I have a kid with an executive function deficit, he may be able to actually tell me he may be able to meet the communication need. He's just not doing it within the time the test is normed for.
Exactly.
So that means,
That I'm glad you said that,
yeah, because
because
the self
that's
has a
what we're
timed response.
struggling. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're struggling right now with some testings that was completed on my stepson, and they want to say he's normal. He's in the normal range. However, those executive function issues are showing up at home and in the classroom.
And here's the other thing too. What's normal?
Whatever
Because
the this
a lot of people confuse normal with polite.
yeah,
Those aren't the same.
whatever the test quote unquote considers is normal.
And it also depends on the evaluator's perception of executive dysfunction. In
Mm-hmm.
my mind, if you've been, and this is always why I tell families, it's not, it's great to get assessments. I will never, in fact, I tell everybody, get them assessed. Let them run all the tests. Do them all. But here's the important thing. An assessment is only a piece of the puzzle. And we all know a puzzle could have, you got 100-piece puzzle, you still have a puzzle even if you got 20 pieces missing.
Mm-hmm.
That does not mean that the puzzle is still inherently not a puzzle. It is. It just looks different.
It's just not complete.
Well, no, it could very much so be complete. I'm pretty certain it's an artist somewhere that's done made some money, that's done put together part of a puzzle, glazed it in something, and stuck it on the wall, and somebody paid a lot of money for it.
True.
So in my mind, as a clinician who specializes in thinking about how to best ensure that the child gets their needs met. It's never a matter of right, wrong, complete, incomplete. The simple matter of the fact is this kid needs to get his homework done. What's it going to take to get his homework done? Well, he's got to do it because everybody else has to do it. I didn't say that he didn't. I'm just asking you, what does he need to do for it to be done?
Mm-hmm.
That might look like, instead of executive, like for an executive function student that needs support with that, I'm not saying he doesn't have to do 20 of the homework problems. What I am saying is you might need to have him do 10 of them at school and 10 of them at home. If he's got if he's got a shorter attention span, or he doesn't have the skills to independently execute and be successful with longer assignments. He can still do the assignment. It's just broken into smaller parts.
Mm-hmm.
That is
Yeah.
what executive function looks like. And then also, you're correct, Ms. Phyllis. Sometimes it can be complete and there's still left other pieces of the puzzle. Yeah. You could also have a complete puzzle and have some of the pieces in the wrong spot. Puzzle's full, but you still got
Yeah.
some pieces that are not where they should be. So the puzzle still may not look like what we think it looks like.
Exactly.
Does that mean that it's not a good puzzle? No, it just looks a little different. Might have to switch it a little bit so that it makes sense to the eye. Or, and in my mind, I always tell parents, and because the parents have asked me, is there any medication they can take for executive function? Yes, there is. Likely though, you probably parents, when they hear the word, they hear that magic word of Ritalin.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's in it. They no, I don't want the medicine. Okay, well, I get that, Mom. I promise, I do. But guess what? I take my Ritalin every day, just like the kids do. And so right now, I actually am unmedicated. It's the end of my day. My meds have worn off. And so I love being able to be a millennial therapist that is both very nerdy. I love to read. These are 2 of 8 books, 9 bookshelves in my house, completely full. That doesn't count the 2 in the garage, and that doesn't count the piles of books on the floor around me, and that doesn't count the 4 books on top of here on this desk. Just because I take medication in order to increase my focus and decrease my executive function load, that doesn't make me any less of a student. That doesn't
No.
make me any less of a person that performs. That doesn't make me a person who is any less deserving of kindness, gentleness, or anything. And when I
Mm-hmm.
was still in the schools, I did not take Ritalin when I was in the schools before my head injury, but I took other medications.
Mm-hmm.
And my kids would say, I'm not taking my meds. And so I would walk around the school with a medicine bottle that looked just like this with a label and everything. My kids actually didn't realize that I had put some whiteout tape over it because it had been a bottle of antibiotics. And all they saw was my name on it. And I would fill it with white Tic Tacs so that when my kids didn't want to take their meds at school, I'd walk around and say, I'm not going to do it. And I'm like, okay, well, let me tell you what. You know what happens when you don't take your meds and how you feel. Well, what do you think happens when I don't take mine? I've been on this earth twice as long as you. Let's see who can last longer. I can assure you it won't be you.
Mm-hmm.
And so the other thing is I'd be like, all right, I got mine. We take ours together. So one day a principal asked me, he said, what do you take? I said, oh, a Tic Tac. You want one? And so it became more important to humanize the need for the support for having all sorts of options for
Mm-hmm.
supporting executive function. As someone who has ADHD and a traumatic brain injury now, let me tell you something. The hamsters are still up there. In fact, I'm pretty certain they multiplied. But all of the wheels that they run on, I promise you, some people are running, some of them are not, some of them are sleeping, and some of them run at the wrong time of day.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
but the cognitive load for me to still perform is there. So what do? I take my Ritalin so that all of my hamsters at least run at the same time, even if they're at different speeds.
Yeah.
It's the same way for a kid. Does that medication change who I am? No. It changes how I perform. There's a difference.
Yeah. So is it a myth that when individuals take these medications, I've heard a lot about, oh, it makes them drowsy, or they're unable to focus, and so is that a myth?
It depends on what medication it is. So here's the other thing too. When parents say that, and let me also give you this. from what my experience has been with families that make statements like that. You have to also understand the context in which a family makes a statement.
Okay.
There are some families who are so accustomed or have become accustomed to upheaval and inconsistency. Dare I say it, even traumatic interactions, that peace looks like zombieism. Stability and calmness look like zombieism. I always use that term because I asked a mom one time, I said, "What do you mean when you say zombie?" She's like, "He sits in one spot for 2 to 3 hours. He'll get up, he'll walk around, he'll go sit back down, he'll write a little bit." I said, "Wait a minute. Isn't that what y'all asked him to do?"
That's what they wanted, right? I want my child to sit still.
And in my mind, my thought process is I don't care if he's standing on his head, long as his homework is done and he's not harming himself for someone else, or you're not making a spectacle of yourself for attention. But it took being a Black woman at the time. I've taken different forms of medication for mental health needs and or brain needs since I was 18 years old. And God knows the amount of it's there are people that would say, "Oh, you don't need that medicine. You're so smart." What does smart have to do with have you ever considered that maybe it's because of the ADHD that my brain does really good things that actually give me an edge? But who wants to have a brain that runs at the speed of light all day long? The amount of cognitive energy that it takes. And sometimes what that's actually been diagnosed as in women? Anxiety. Your brain doesn't stop. It's constantly looking for a solution. It's constantly looking for a problem to solve. It's constantly preparing for a reality that's not there. It never stops. It never stops. It never stops.
Oh,
When in
wow.
reality, when I take my methylphenidate, guess what? My brain actually slows down long enough to say, wait a minute, is there a threat in front of you? No. Okay. How many things you got to get done today? Oh, about 6. Okay, well, let's write those 6 down. And that's where things like this come in.
Yes.
So having a
Helps you to be
notebook.
organized.
Oh, that word makes me crawl. Because I have never been. You know me. You know me. I am, but you look at, well, they're like, okay, well, wait a minute. How's that? Calm down. Well, how am I going to get this? You ain't got to get it all done right now. So I always would tell my parents, best things first. What is required for this kid to, number one, be happy, healthy, safe, educated? Those are the things I only want to know about. And then when they give me those 4, I say, okay, now which of those, if they don't do, will you be like, okay, we can do this later? Then we'd work through this thing and we would talk to families and they'd be like, oh, well, I really want him to do this. And my mom was like, I want him to wash the dishes without me having to tell him to wash the dishes. And I said, how old is he? She said, he's 15. And I said, well, why doesn't he wash the dishes? Because I wash them. Oh, well, I wouldn't wash them either.
Exactly.
I leave them sitting right there. Ma'am, I'm 35 right now, and I leave them sitting right there. When my mom comes to visit, I love the fact that I have a loving mom. She's amazing. But I've discovered I can't clean the house before she gets here. Because then she has nothing to fuss about and nothing to do. So I have to leave it dirty. If I leave it dirty, she'll clean it. So why stress myself out? My executive function says instead of making sure that I've done all the things, I have to leave her something to fuss about. I just reframe the way that I think about it. Instead of it being, I didn't have time to do it. It's more so a matter of, Mom, you do this a whole lot better than me. I left a list. And guess what? There's no list. There's no list there.
Yes.
And so you reframe the way that you think about it. I know y'all watching and laughing at me. I get it. But guess what? Some of those things are how I've learned to cope with executive function skills that don't always hit. And by having those experiences and sharing those with parents and families, it normalizes the experience because they'll say to me, he's never going to get through college. Ma'am, I can assure you he'll get through. I promise he will. Or they'll say, it takes him longer to do this test. Well, why is that? He needs peace and quiet. Okay, well, we can get him test and accommodation and put him in a room by himself. Done.
Mm-hmm.
You hadn't said nothing.
So you just have to create that environment for them to be successful.
The thing I always
Yeah.
tell parents when I'm going through when we're coaching for special education advocacy, I always tell them, I said, I really love this bass in your voice while we sitting here talking. And they'll say, I said, yeah, gain that amount of audacity when you're advocating for your child to have an equitable school environment.
Mm-hmm.
I believe in going to any entity, school, public, does not matter. I am literally the person that will go to Macy's and not carry the bags out if I can somehow figure out get somebody else to do it.
Oh, wow.
Oh, ma'am, you know me. But I say that to say this. You don't know what you will get unless you try.
Yes.
Don't you tell yourself no. Don't you get this idea in your head. Well, my child has to do it just like everybody else. No, they don't. They don't make children who we perceive to be intellectually gifted and higher performing do it the same way as everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
if we don't make them do it, why should we make your kid do it? Now, I'm not saying that means we change the standards, but if there's a framework there for figuring out truly what needs to get done and working with the student to do that, then you do it. Notice I haven't said anything yet about special ed aside from the fact that it exists.
Mm-hmm.
There are things that naturally we can do for students to make it easier.
So pretty much for those children, they need accommodations.
You need accommodations. And here's the thing. If there is a diagnosis that a student carries that one of the symptoms of it is executive function, carry the diagnosis, call it what it is,
Mm-hmm.
and that's fine. Explain to his teachers, his community, not a community, but his working environment. And I say working not as if they're working, but where they are.
Yes.
Call it what it is. Be comfortable with talking about it. There are people that will say to me now, they think just because doctor is in front of my name that I don't get to have struggles. I said I can have a doctorate and a disability. Two things can be true at one time.
That's the truth.
I can be incredible.
They can coexist. And you
Ma'am,
can still be functional. Yes.
I can assure you, I could talk about traumatic brain injuries and cognitive function for the next 60 days without taking a breath. Ask me when is the last time I paid a bill probably on time like I should have without having to basically call the company and say, I'm sorry, I have an executive function disorder. I promise I have the money. I just forgot to pay you guys. I'm sorry. and that's the other thing.
So what strategy do you use? I mean, they have auto pay, they have all that stuff.
Yeah, I get that, but I don't think that far ahead.
You don't think that far ahead? Okay.
Well, and so here's the other thing. So let's talk about that. So you notice how you say we have all these strategies such as auto pay and everything and all these, and you're correct. And imagine something for the average American that is financially secure, that doesn't have to worry about that, or they have consistent enough employment where auto pay would be helpful. That works. For people that have executive function disorders, we are less likely to be gainfully employed at with a rate of compensation that actually allows us to do that. Why? Because executive dysfunctions impact the very things that people perceive to be characteristics of a great worker. For example, one of my jobs, I negotiated two things: student loan repayment and the start time. Why? I am not a morning person. Never have been. Never have been. When you and I talked the other night, it was in the evening and I was at my most lively. But if you call me at 7 o'clock in the morning, there better be a fire, because that's the only thing that's gonna get in fact, the house I'm in better be on fire. Because brain, it isn't there. Now, 2 o'clock in the morning, that's when I do my researching, my reading, my documenting. That's when I do it. Why? Because that's when my body is awake. But guess what? I'm a speech and language pathologist that works with children and families. Is my body's natural best performing time aligned with the work that I do? No.
No.
Is it aligned with the traditional, you're going to be an 8 to 5 manager, I got to be here at 7:30 and stay here till 6? No.
I'm seeing some comments coming in, but I cannot read them. I
Oh
can't. I
no, hold on.
can't
I
read them.
can. Miss Denise said I live by my notebooks and my lists, and checking and crossing off things bring me joy. Girl, you get to check them off. You actually get to them. That's so
Oh,
cute.
that's me. That's me.
Okay, so I love that you brought that up because now I want to show you. So everybody knows I am pink obsessed. I think Mikel, you know that if it's in my life, it has to be pink. But what I love is that one of my accommodations for myself, because I do so, because I have a private business and I have clients, and since the brain injury, it's been hard. One of the things that I do is that I take a lot of meetings. So guess what? I have to buy from Amazon a meeting notebook.
Mm-hmm.
It's got numbered pages so that I can put down who I spoke to when. You guys see right here, there's the topic, who attended, what were we discussing? What was happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
I always keep one of these. Well, guess what I also always have? A monthly planner like this that goes in my purse. And here's the difference between it and a traditional planner. It's only a monthly spread. And this is actually a new one, guys, so I got to fill it in. But at the current moment, when I am planning across multiple months for developing either a product, content, or preparing for a conference, I don't need to know what I'm doing every day. I just need to know what's happening on the overarching month. Well, someone's probably sitting there thinking, well, wouldn't one calendar suffice for that? Um, yeah, sure, but I hadn't found the one that works yet. So, then, like you guys saw, my notebook, it has 3 sections. There are different types of paper in them depending on what my brain needs that day. Sometimes what my brain needs is a colored piece of paper so that I'll remember it because I'll pay attention to the color, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it needs a list of priorities that are pink and force me to pay attention. And of course, they're rose gold because why not? Sometimes I have to remember to put the things that are just whimsical behind something that is whimsical. So when I need my brain to take a break and I don't want to take medication to relax, I color. And so I then use those to put tabs in my notebooks, right? And as of course, a faith believing woman such as yourself, one of my favorite verses. And though Proverbs 31 is one of the is my favorite proverb, it's verses
Mm-hmm.
8 and 9. And
Yes.
if you haven't read, 8 and 9 speaks about how we serve those who have less, or those
Yes.
um who will always be in need. And that is actually the driving practice behind my business, Lead the Talk. It stands for listening, educating, advocating, and directing the conversations you have every day. And so let's see, hold on. Sometimes they know a person that exhibits what you were describing about you. They're highly successful and would not say they have this condition. Do they need diagnosing and maybe medication? That depends. Are they having problems at work? Are they having problems in their personal life? Are they making decisions that cause them financial ruin
Mm-hmm.
or personal ruin? Are they ruining their friendships because they don't know how to read the room. They don't know when to say something, when not to say something, or when to flatfoot say, I'm overloaded and I can't do this right now. Now that sounds like mental health, right? Executive
And it probably
function
would be this, and it probably would be diagnosed as mental health.
could be, but
Yeah.
executive function means also knowing there's a goal in mind. If my goal is to console my friend, right? If my goal is to console my friend, well, what would console my friend? That has nothing to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
That has everything to do with me, number one, knowing my friend. Number two, first and foremost, thinking, well, what would she like? And can I do that? Right? And
Mm-hmm.
then the third thing is, well, what if I don't like what she likes? Will I still do it? That's typically where people break down. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, sometimes that's a combination of mental health and executive functioning. But if you're missing the other two parts, probably more mental health. The executive function piece is if you get all of the parts, but maybe you do them out of order, you do them at the
Mm-hmm.
wrong time, you have great intent, and the message goes over smoothly, but maybe it just doesn't have the impact you'd like. That's less mental health for me from my perspective and more executive function.
Yeah.
So I will like for example, if we're talking to a girlfriend that's doing something and we all have had those moments, where she's doing something where you like, look, sis, I'm about tired of hearing the story over it again. I get the choice right then. Executive function says the goal is to support my friend.
Mm-hmm.
Mental health says I'm not going to sit here and continue to sit in a pity party with you about the same thing. So
Mm-hmm.
two things can be true right there, right? I
Mm-hmm.
might not want to sit in a pity party, but I have to weigh the parts of both of them. And so if what I desire is to be present for my friend, then maybe how I'm present for her in that moment is, instead of planning to say I don't want to sit there, maybe the plan then is to say I want to be here with you and I want to sit here with you, but I'm also going to ask you why we keep having to sit here. I don't mind sitting, but can we go sit on another part of the bench?
Yeah, or set
So
a
there,
time limit.
or I'm not even gonna say that, but can we sit
Yeah.
on another bench? Because but the other thing is that it all of it requires awareness, knowing when and where
Mm-hmm.
and how to do. I believe
And
that a
that's
lot of times we focus on mental health so much that we forget the very basic things. Sometimes is that people didn't say the what they said had validity. It's just the fact that somebody didn't like that they said it. That happens all the time,
mm-hmm.
So
And there's a comment on that too.
mhm.
Dr. Denise, she said the question is, does it
Does it
impact
impact
daily
daily living?
living? And that's true. It always
If it
goes back to its impact on daily living.
Because here's the thing, me having executive dysfunction doesn't have an impact on my daily living as long as I have income that stays in my bank account above a certain amount and it's able to be oh wait, hold on. Oh, disappeared, came back. Okay, there we go. Um Me having an executive function disorder, it doesn't impact my daily living as much if I have a resting bank account balance of $10,000 at all times and it'll never go anywhere. I have nothing to worry
Mm-hmm.
about. So me not remembering to pay a bill or not remembering to check on something doesn't matter. If executive dysfunction doesn't matter, if my friends accept the fact, they're like, oh well, Daria's gonna say this because she's just gonna get sick of it and be done with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if your friends struggle with that, that might be an issue for you. If you don't have those other combinations of factors, it could be. So I say that to say this, it's always about the impact on daily living, but even more so than daily living, adults are adults. They get to choose the life they have. If they are perfectly okay with it impacting their daily living, the only thing I can do is give them info. I can give them options. I can say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I can assess this for you. We can come up with a plan together. And that's actually another piece of executive dysfunction that we should talk about with families. I tell parents, look, it is your right to have your child assessed for any disorder that you believe, or you could have me assessed to see if a disorder exists.
Mm-hmm.
This is what will happen. This could potentially happen if I don't. And I tell parents, if you don't give us permission to assess, that means that there's a potential that your child could have a disorder. We don't catch it. They don't receive intervention. It gets worse, or they could spontaneously get better. But that's when I
Mm-hmm.
tell parents that current evidence based research shows that 75% of children that are of the same culture or are of the same age as your child do not improve without intervention.
Mm-hmm.
The 25% that do improve without intervention actually had other mediating factors that supported them, even if it wasn't formal clinical intervention. And so
Mm-hmm.
parents will then be like, oh, I didn't know that. Now, on the
Yeah,
other side of
structure.
it,
They probably had more structure.
or, they got some mental health support.
Yeah.
Parents got divorced, parents got married, they moved to
Mm-hmm.
another house, they moved out of a certain school, they went to a school that was fully staffed. This kid stopped this kid I don't know. I mean, when I tell you the reasons, the 25%, and that's a very arbitrary number, it's just an example, team, but
Yeah.
the biggest thing is that it matters less to me about testing a kid. It matters more to me about giving the parent the right to choose. And then
Mm-hmm.
this is the uncomfortable part, standing on business with the choice.
Got to execute.
Well, here's the thing. There have been times a parent did not allow the school team to assess. It's more than just accommodations in the classroom. It is federal legal protections that keep your kids safe from being mistreated because they have a disability.
Mhm.
If you do not let us formally identify that, those protections don't ensue. If you give us permission to assess, and we come back as a team at a school and says, hey, we think your kid has this, and we would like to make them eligible for this category. If a parent says, I disagree, guess what? You just turned down. It's like walking into a bull ring,
Mhm.
and there's nothing but you standing there in red. When instead, if you let us come with you, we'll give you some other targets dressed in red to keep you safe. It might not work all the time, but the risk will go down. And so I actually had a parent find that out the very hard way. We assessed her child. Her child, and it was a young man. The team, we believed he met the qualifier for emotional and behavioral disorder due to severe depression. He was not one of the kids that um he was not one of the kids that we think, oh, he was yelling and angry all the time. He was one of the kids that if he had one more break, like we actually ended up having an IP meeting for him because we were concerned he was suicidal. That was,
Mhm.
and so those students have protections by the law too under emotional and behavioral disorder. Now, guess what? Depending on what their disorders are, there are some school teams that may make a ruling for OHI. I am the SLP that fights against that. OHI could cover anything from asthma to everything else. Emotional and behavioral disorder tells me that this child's mental health deviates from what we know to be typical and safe, even when we
Mhm.
take cultural considerations, culture into consideration, or environment. And
Mhm.
that ruling comes with protections that truly would give that kid some leeway, you know? And
Okay.
so the we said, we're telling you he's eligible, but the mom declined services. Well, 4 weeks later, when he did something that earned him a 180-day suspension, what do you think
Mm.
happened?
She's back.
He's got special needs.
Mhm.
Not to us. Not like that. And here's the thing. She did consent to giving him an IEP, but he had to serve the disciplinary action first.
Mhm. So, we've been focusing on executive function,
Mm-hmm.
but we haven't focused on the second part, and I think that's critical.
Okay.
Is why telling them what to do doesn't work.
Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. That's how much of an answer I have. That's how much of an answer I have. That's how much of an answer I have. Here's another book of that's how much of an answer I have. Stop telling them what to do.
Yeah, so explain over
Whew.
prompting, learned helplessness, unintentionally rob kids of chance to develop their skills. Let's delve into that. Because as
And
parents, I mean, we're quick to
and
say,
y'all love them so much.
"Oh
Y'all don't
yes,
want them
oh
to find
yes."
out that fat meat is greasy and and hot and stoves are hot. Let them burn themselves. They'll figure it out. Because let me
Mm-hmm.
tell you something, and we say that we love to joke about those statements, but you know what I tell parents? I'm not saying you let your kid get themselves into danger, but you do need to see how they'd respond. If you constantly do it for them, you will miss it. For example, how long we've seen some people tying shoes for fourth graders and fifth graders?
Wow,
That's why I worked in high schools. I'm not tying no shoes.
I wouldn't either.
I'm not tying no shoes. I'm not. What else am I not doing? It's but here's the thing.
Wiping nose.
Changing diapers. But let me say this. So parents, it's gonna be uncomfortable. But it's something that I discovered, now that's backed by research. A lot of times parents, even though they know that they have a child that has different needs or a disability or special needs, they overcompensate by trying to make sure their child doesn't take up too much space. And in my mind, my thought process is they're entitled to space. So what if it's more than some other kids? That's fine.
Mhm.
We have some other kids that perform in a way that they take up less space. right? And Miss Phyllis and Miss Denise. Oh, I ain't touching no laces. And
Yeah,
Miss
she's
Phyllis,
not
and
doing
when you do
laces.
those things, you are taking away their independence, but you're also taking away that inner motivation and success too.
Yes.
The
Yes.
goal, the desire to learn and to develop and grow, that internal motivator wheel. If you constantly do it and you get to be the person that checks it off the list and not them, they will not respect checking it off the list because they don't get a thrill out of it.
Exactly.
Why do we think sticker economies work so well with little children? They really want the sticker.
Mm-hmm.
And see, at a certain point, I love, and here's the other thing. How many of y'all bribe y'all's kids with material items? Yeah, I'm not doing that. I don't, let me tell you why. Because
No,
what
not.
happened,
I guess I don't bribe them, but whenever they accomplish something, it's a reward.
I respect that. And the reason, and here's the thing. However, any parent chooses to do it is fine. But I always warn parents, if everything you do is tied to a physical reward, God help you if you lose your job or if your child gets to the point that they won't work unless they get something.
Oh no. I mean, it's sporadic. Like at the end of the year, if you
For
bring
you.
home this, yeah, for me, it's not.
For
Yeah,
you. But
yeah.
not for, do you know how many parents I've seen literally sitting there bribing their children with Skittles?
Oh
And
wow.
I'm like, well, reward can be a bribery technique. I don't believe in bribing children. Here's the other thing too. You guys, I'm 35 years old, but I was raised by two old school people. There are some things in this world, there are things you have to do.
Of course.
There may not always be some roses at the end of it. That's not saying that you work for free or do things like that. But one of the things that I established when I was working in the schools, and for the reference, my schools were the lowest performing schools in the state of Tennessee. They had been taken over by the state. So I was working in the most dangerous parts of town with students that had been in schools that were the lowest achieving.
Mm-hmm.
Those were students who came from high poverty backgrounds, high trauma backgrounds, things like that. I didn't have enough money to buy something for them. But guess what I had to do? My caseload was 95% African American male. Nearly all of them came from homes that did not have two parents. So, a lot of them came from homes that did not even have the custodial parents of a mother and father. They were staying with a relative. So,
Mm-hmm.
how do you build motivation and respect and maintain that? And you foster this sense of self learning in a group of children who may not have had the traditional motivators, such as the bribery techniques of you do this, you'll get this. Or what did you do when those children had those environments, but guess what happened? That trust contract was broken because when they would reach the goal, if the reward could not be purchased, they didn't get it. So what
Mm-hmm.
that child
Mm-hmm.
actually learned was that it does not matter what I do, I will not get a reward. I will not be rewarded for my good work.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually something that we see in a lot of parents too. And some
Yeah.
people say I couldn't afford it, so I couldn't bribe my children. Well, yeah, but here's the other thing that you also can't. But this is also why I push this for
That's
parents.
my mom. She said she couldn't afford it, so
You can bribe your children.
she couldn't bribe. She couldn't bribe us.
I don't know about you, Miss Phyllis. I don't know if my mom would say she couldn't afford it. All I knew was her nickname was the warden, and I didn't want to go to jail. So it was look.
Oh, she was too. She was too.
But I tell parents, if you want to develop a skill in a child, you develop their confidence within themselves. That's how you do that. So if a kid says, I can't do this, my first question is why? Does your hand work? Yes. Do you have a pencil? Yes. Do you have paper? Yes. Then you can do it. Now, whether or not you can do all of it at one time, different discussion. So I would always reframe those conversations of it's not that I can't do it. Now, if a child truly could not do something, I would flat out say, um, this child can't do this under these circumstances. Or
Mm-hmm.
they
Mm-hmm.
can't do this under this. And then what I used to, this is the cherry on top of the cake. I would say the typically developing children in that classroom aren't doing it either. So why do you have a higher standard for my child than you have? And I would say mine, because they were mine.
Oh yeah, of
Um,
course.
ma'am, they were all mine. Some of them are married with children now, and I'm still not, and they still mine. But I would say we have a higher standard for students who have differences because we want to make them perform. I don't believe in performance. I believe in the development of sustainable skills that are comfortable, that do not force this child to contort themselves into some form of a pretzel just so they can get a goldfish cracker. I don't believe in doing that. Because what happens when they get in the real world and somebody else doesn't think they should have the goldfish cracker, or we have the kids that earn the goldfish crackers and somebody else eats them? Are they supposed to stop working then?
Yeah.
No. So my focus with parents, especially, and remember, high school population. How many kids do you think from high school not having those skills? So I have to tell parents, you can't fill out his job applications for him. You can't do that for him. It says some tasks that are required in schools are not even development appropriate. Pre-K and kindergarten motor skills. You mean to tell me you don't think they ought to be bubbling in the little dots on the standardized test, Miss Denise? That's what they supposed to do. They supposed to bubble. Using a pen, using a pencil that's this big. They don't get to have a big pen. Why would we let them have a good old thick pencil? You know, a good old tri-sided Ticonderoga. Why would we do that? That's honestly what drove me batty in the elementary schools, is that we would ask kids to do things that were not developmentally appropriate. That's like, for example, anybody ever dealt with a sassy teenager?
Oh boy, we're down to 5 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
Time flies.
Okay, let me close
we'll
out.
definitely have to have you back to
oh my goodness,
say some more.
The pinch.
Yes, we'll definitely have to have
Dr. Denise, also you're talking to a bougie woman that writes with a fountain pen. So but it's so long story short, oh my goodness, as you guys clearly can tell, I love this, but you also saw that for somebody with executive dysfunction, we don't think about time. We just love what we love, right? And so in closing, when you're thinking about supporting families and for supporting students, especially with the don't do it for them, instead of doing it for them, do it along beside them. Don't do the teach it. You got to do it this way. No, instead it's say, oh, I always put the dishes on this side because I figure when I'm on the left side, the garbage disposal is on this side too. So when I get done with the dishwater, I can just run the disposal and it cleans the sink. It doesn't come out as, why are you doing it that way? Don't you know? If the goal is to get the dishes washed, why do you care which way they do it as long as the kitchen sink is clean, they haven't stopped up your plumbing, and the dishes are clean? So instead of going from it as a matter of I'm going to do it for you or I'm going to scold you for how you do it, what I'm then going to do is I'm going to stand beside you and work with you as you do it. So I'm going to talk you through. So that is, for me, closing out. I love this topic. I could talk about it all day and all night, but obviously one of my favorites, but you guys were amazing. And so I will hush so we close out. But yes.
So that was going to be my closing statement. If you could tell every parent or teacher one thing about executive function, what would it be?
Do it along beside them and narrate what you're doing. Act as if you are a content creator all day, every day, and you're talking to an audience and not your son or daughter or your student. I used to walk around with my niece when she was 4 years old. Oh my goodness, I need to get my jacket. We're going outside because it's going to be so cold. And do you have your jacket? And she said, I have my jacket. I have my shoes, and here's my purse. I didn't tell her to go get those things. I asked her if she had one thing, but because she knew that naturally when she left the house, she had to have the other things.
Association.
It's a very gentle way to teach a kid on how to do something. It's also, you can do this with adults too. If you go out to dinner with a friend, some people know, don't take me to certain restaurants. I'm not going to eat there. I will always say, oh goodness, thank goodness. I know the valet is going to be ready for us. So you know what? Don't take me to some place that I have to walk 50 miles. I don't have to tell them. You naturally associate it. But you can do it in so many ways. And of course, I would love to come back. This is a topic that I promise you is so very near and dear to my heart. I absolutely love it. It makes me very happy.
Oh yeah, definitely. I just want to thank you. Thank you for coming and share your knowledge with us. And I hope our viewers who have children that may be struggling with, some awareness have been brought. So even if you didn't know it was executive function, now you're aware and at least have some things that you can implement.
The other thing too is that I am a special education advocate and can do so in all 50 states. I do virtual consultations and document reviews for families. So if families get a report back and they're like, wait a minute, I'm not quite sure I understand this, I do that. I also offer parent coaching in a way that they meet with me and we actually coach the parent on how to communicate with the school to get the best results. What I love about my business,
I have a recommendation for you.
Oh, okay. But yeah, but what I love about that too is that we often think that we have barriers to service because we don't have money. Sometimes it's not a money thing. It's just a way of knowing when to lead that talk. So we
Yes,
teach others
yes.
to listen to us, we educate them, we advocate for ourselves, and we direct how we want things to go. We don't leave that up to other people.
Okay, so in closing, I just want to say executive function isn't just about getting kids to do what you want. It's about helping them become the kind of people who can do what they want with purpose and confidence. So if we can shift from being taskmasters to brain builders, we'll raise kids who aren't just well behaved, but well equipped for life. So I just want to thank you for tuning in tonight. And next week, please tune in next week, where we will have a special guest who will continue to speak on speech therapy and what we do. Thank you.